Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? I put this video together to help us figure out ways to heal our relationship with ourselves. Okay. Sometimes we act as our own worst enemies and we're worse to ourselves than other people are to us. So it's really important for our own mental health and well-being to transform that relationship. So instead of being our worst enemies, to really turn into our best friends. Okay. So this video is all about how to do that, okay? So here we go. Da, 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 da. Coming. There we go. All right, so I have a little subtitle. It was hard to get the title right for this one, to be honest. So anyway, so it's called Healing Your Relationship with Yourself. Move from being your own worst enemy to your own best friend. Okay, so that's the theme of today. All right, so I'm sure we've said this to ourselves sometimes, right? Like, I'm my own worst enemy. You could probably think of times in your life where you self-sabotaged or you made mistakes or you messed things up or you treated yourself badly and said, man, I'm my own worst enemy, right? And what happens is, if we grew up with people that didn't treat us well, we end up doing the same things to ourselves, right? We kind of internalize people who were actual people in our lives, and then we do that within ourselves, okay? But we don't have to keep doing that. I mean, there's a reason why it started, but there's always a way out of that. There's a new path we can take, okay? So I'm gonna break down a few components of how we're our own worst enemy. And one component is when we abandon ourselves, right? I'm sure a lot of you out there are very concerned about being quote unquote abandoned by other people. You might have had real experiences of that, where people really just walked out on you when you really felt like you needed them, and it was extremely painful. But how many times, if you think about it, do we abandon ourselves, right? We do this to ourselves too. It's almost like we're in that car driving away when there's a part of ourselves that really needs us, right? So we got to think about that. When do I abandon myself? And if you look up the word abandonment in the definition, it says cease to support or look after yourself or someone, or to desert, right? So sometimes we don't look after ourselves in our best interests. We desert ourselves in our time of greatest need, right? And that's really, really painful. So let's look at some of the ways we do that. So first I put the thing on the left with the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, right? Because sometimes we abandon ourselves by refusing to be with ourselves, refusing to listen to ourselves or to tune into ourselves, right? We literally abandon ourselves by not being there when we need us, right? So some examples, like not listening to or following our intuition, right? Ever have a gut feeling about something and you try to logic your way out of it? Like you don't feel safe with somebody, but you're like, oh, that's probably okay. And then you get yourself into a dangerous situation, right? Sometimes we don't follow our intuition that's trying to help us, right? Other times, our emotions are signals that are trying to communicate something important to us, right? Like if I'm afraid, maybe it's for a reason. Maybe I need to protect myself in some way. But if I ignore my emotions, I don't even recognize them, I push them away, right? How are my emotions supposed to help me? Okay. Other times, we don't recognize our needs. And if we do know what they are, we don't know how to meet them in a healthy way, or we just neglect our needs altogether, but they don't really go away. They're still buried under there, right? And that's hard too, because it's important for us to recognize and meet our needs. Everybody has needs. Also, sometimes we don't recognize, identify, or live from our values, right? Our wise mind core values should be driving the bus of our decision making. But sometimes, especially when we're emotional mind, it just goes out the window and we don't even act in line with our values. And sometimes we're not even sure what they are, okay? So these are all ways that we abandon ourselves, all right? Okay, more ways. I forgot about this slide. Think about this. When our wise mind goes out the window, it's kind of missing in action. And then our emotional mind takes over and starts making all the decisions for us. Uh-oh. It's like having a kid driving the car. Oh my God, it's making turns and speeding and crashing into things. And we're going, what the hell is going on here, right? So when we let, immature parts of ourselves with bad judgment and over the top emotions lead the way, we're kind of like, it's like being home alone, right? It's like the wise parent isn't there to run the show when they should be, okay? We're kind of letting the wrong parts of ourselves dictate how things go. And that's a sense of like self-abandonment too, because the wise mind needs to be in charge, right? Other times, especially when we're an emotional mind, we don't think about consequences, or we're aware of the consequences, but we don't care, and we're just going to do something destructive anyway. Just like that woman in the picture, just cutting all her hair off, which maybe she'll regret later. And also, you know, when we're not in wise mind, we forget about our goals. Like, what are we working for? What in the long term am I really trying to accomplish in my life, right? And so when we can't trust that we're going to, you know, keep those things in mind, which are really important to us on some level, we're kind of abandoning ourselves, right? Okay, another category of being our own worst enemy is self-abuse, okay? And this obviously takes different forms. But if you look it up in the dictionary, abuse is defined as to treat with cruelty and violence, especially regularly or repeatedly, right? So there might have been times in our life when we were actually abused by other people, and now we're doing it to ourselves. And there's different ways that we do it. Some are more subtle than others, okay? So on the one hand, you know, we have different parts within us. We have vulnerable parts, we have emotional parts, we have angry parts, we have fight parts, we have shameful parts, we have fearful parts, right? We have narcissistic parts. And sometimes we hate those parts of ourselves. We criticize those parts, we belittle them, we shame them. And it makes it so much more traumatizing when we do that, right? So that's very tied into the next one. That says self-criticism and self-judgment. So when we're allowing that self-critical voice to run the show, right? To berate us, to put us down, it's a form of self-abuse, right? It reminds me of, there's a type of assertiveness, I guess you could say, called nonviolent communication, right? When we have that self-critical voice going on and we allow that, and we belittle ourselves, that's like violent self-communication, right? It's not nonviolent communication. We're being violent to ourselves on a certain level, okay? And that's not conducive to wellness or healing at all, right? Another slightly more subtle version is when we're getting too perfectionistic. Why? Because we're setting goals that are impossible to reach. So, you know, it's like we're trying to reach it, but we're never there. It's never good enough. We're always setting ourselves up for failure. And we're always making ourselves feel bad because we can't get there. And it's coming from that base of being not good enough. And that in itself is very shaming and, you know, kind of makes us feel bad, right? So it's a little bit of a twinge of self-abuse in there too. Also, kind of a broad category, which encompasses a lot of things. The actions we do to ourselves could be a form of self-abuse. And in some forms, it could be an addiction, right? Drinking alcohol, using drugs, for example, spending all your money. It's harmful. It can be physically harmful. It can be emotionally harmful. Eating disorders, not eating well, not resting properly, not exercising properly, self-injuring. All those things are forms of self-abuse. And there's no way you're ever going to feel good about yourself if your actions are self-abusive. Even if you have positive affirmations and you read self-help books, if you're physically hurting yourself in some way or not taking care of yourself well, it's never going to add up for you, right? So it's really a form of self-abuse. Okay, next part of being your own worst enemy, self-betrayal, okay? I'm sure you've been betrayed by other people, but sometimes you betray yourself too, right? We do this to ourselves. I saw this cartoon and I was like, wow, it's a little corny, but it's kind of true. Like when someone says, don't worry, I've got your back, you know, it's kind of like, I'm going to be there for you. I trust you. But when in that picture, he actually grabbed the guy's spine away, he wasn't being very trustworthy. He betrayed him. He lied to him, right? So what does betrayal mean? If you look it up, it's to expose, let's say ourselves, or expose oneself to danger by treacherously giving information to an enemy, right? So if you're being your own worst enemy and you can't be trusted with what you're doing with yourself, it's like you're betraying yourself, right? Another definition was to be disloyal to, right? So you're really often being disloyal to yourself, not looking out for your best interests when there's an act of self-betrayal, all right? So let's explore this a little bit more, right? So a lot of times, I'm sure I think the best examples, but a lot of these have to do with how we operate in relationships to others, right? Sometimes we don't have our back, so to speak, like that cartoon, when we're in our relationships to others, right? Sometimes when we're by ourselves, it's not too bad. Then all of a sudden, you know, maybe we get in a relationship and we're afraid of speaking up for ourselves. We're deferring to the other person. We're not expressing our needs. We're putting our needs in the back burner. We're putting our feelings in the back burner. We're not advocating for our best interests. And that's a way of betraying ourselves. If you're a people pleaser or kind of a person that gets into codependent relationships, you're abandoning yourself there too, because you're putting the other person way before you. You might be doing things that are not feeling so right for you because you're neglecting your own personal interests. Or you're putting them so far ahead of you, right? And you're putting all your energy into the other person. So in essence, you're abandoning yourself. Keeping toxic relationships going, probably because you may not feel worthy of a better relationship, right? So you're keeping negative people in your life. You might be keeping abusive people in your life, people that don't treat you that well, because maybe you're afraid like, well, if I let them go, I'll be alone. Or I don't know who else would love me, you know, or maybe I wouldn't be able to find somebody because I'm not so great, right? But when you keep these negative people in your life, it's like, how could you trust yourself? You know, it's like you're letting all the vampires in, you're letting in all the narcissists and the abusers and all that kind of stuff, right? Blaming others. Now, this one might sound funny. It's like, well, what does that have to do with anything? But think about this, right? If I spend a lot of my energy being resentful and blaming others for my misfortunes in life, I'm not taking care of myself at all. I'm spending all my energy thinking about how it's your fault and this one's fault and this one has to pay and this one owes me. And meanwhile, I'm not healing myself at all. None of my energy is coming back to me to take care of my own pain, right? So in essence, I'm abandoning myself. All right. I heard that from someone else. I didn't make that up, but it's pretty powerful, right? Other times, in some form, we kind of don't have our back when we're overly reliant on others to meet our needs, right? Why doesn't we have our back there? Because we can't completely rely on anyone to fully meet our needs, because we're grown-ups, or even if you're adolescent, that's not their job. Unless you're a baby, that's not really their job, you know, and you may not get your needs fully met because the person's not gonna be able to do it. They're gonna be unreliable to some degree because they have their own life. And so you're not gonna do it the way you really need to do it, all right? So you don't fully have your back, so to speak. You have to do some of it yourself. There's a form of like a balance between like self-regulation and co-regulation, but if you're only relying on co-regulation or other regulation, you're not having any power over your, you know, your processes, your thoughts, your emotions, your, you know, your pain or whatever, right? So you have to have your own back too. Okay, so if all these things are operating in your life, there's a lot of negative impacts, right? As you can probably imagine. So some of the impacts that you might be experiencing is more anxiety, more depression, low self-esteem, emptiness, and unfulfilling relationships. Okay, and probably more than that, but those are the main ones that I'm thinking about, right? So it's not going to, in the long run, pay off to be your own worst enemy. So we got to flip this around, all right? So I think it's time. Let's flip it around. So the next half of this talk is going to be about how we could be our own best friend, okay? We treat ourselves worse than we treat most of our friends a lot of the time, for being honest, right? So we got to flip that around, all right? And treat ourselves with as much kindness, respect, love, and care as we would our best friend, right? So we have to flip it back around ourselves. Tara Brach, who's a great meditation teacher, talks about a U-turn, a Y-O-U turn, okay? So sometimes instead of being very outer focused or reliant on others or reliant on however the world is going, we have to do a U-turn, bring it back to us, Y-O-U, or me, right? And take care of ourselves the best we can, being our own best friend. Got it? All right, here we go, how we do this. So one of the main themes I would say that should belong here is developing greater self-trust, okay? A lot of times we're saying, well, I have trust problems, right? I don't know how to trust people, or I spill too much and I don't know how to stop, or I block off too much and I don't know how to reveal. But what about trusting ourselves, right? It has to start with ourselves, always, right? So we have to develop self-trust. So what does this mean? I heard a great definition by Teal Swan in a book called Anatomy of Loneliness. And she said, when we trust ourselves or trust somebody, we consistently have our best interest at heart. Okay? So if you're thinking about yourself as a best friend, you would have your best friend's best interest at heart. And that would always be in the back of your mind, driving what you do and what you decide. Okay? Also, having the confidence, belief, or faith in yourself and your reliability, truth, ability, or strength. Okay? So having faith in yourself, that you could be reliable with yourself, that you have some strength within you, right? Believing in yourself. Okay? All that's about self-trust. So let's look at the picture on the upper right corner, right? So I guess it's supposed to be like the guy and me and myself and I kind of a thing. But so the guy is willing to catch himself when he's falling. He's not just going to let himself drop, right? So abandoning ourselves would be letting ourselves drop, not being there for ourselves. Catching yourself, right, or protecting yourself, keeping yourself safe is looking out for your best interest, right? And being consistent about it, knowing that you'll be there, that you could trust that if you fall down, you'll be there for yourself, okay? Consistently, not just once in a blue moon, right? Okay, but more about that coming up. All right, so general keys to self-trust. So the number one thing, like I was starting to say before, is to practice recognizing your own value and inner goodness, all right? You might be saying, well, but I'm a bad person, right? And I know you might believe that about yourself. But if you read all different things, especially in the spiritual traditions, they always say at the core, we all have a core of inner goodness, right? In DBT, they'll say it's the wise mind. You could say it's your higher self. You could say it's your inner spirit. You could say it's the God within you. However you want to see it, there's an inner core of goodness. And you have to always keep reminding yourself to access that is there, and that could be your guiding principle, okay? So with that in mind, it's important, again, to consistently make choices that honor your best interests. Consistently, right? So therefore, you can rely on yourself. You know, when you want to trust somebody, you got to think, you trust people because they're reliable. If I want to be picked up at the airport, I got to trust that the person's going to show up on time and pick me up like he says he's going to do, right? Is that not that he's going to flake out on me, right? When you trust people, it's because they're reliable, right? So you got to make yourself reliable. Okay, so related to that, keep promises and commitments to yourself. Okay, so for example, if I commit to meditating for 10 minutes a day, I'm going to keep that meditation appointment with myself and make sure I do it. Okay, and if I trust that I'm going to make sure it happens every day, I begin to trust myself, right? Or let's say I know I need to exercise. Okay, I got to get better at exercising. If I make a commitment that every evening I'm going to take a walk around the block and at least walk a little bit, and I do it no matter what, even if it's raining, I'll throw a raincoat on, then I learn to trust myself. Okay, just a couple examples. Also, you have to have courage to do what's needed, right? So when we're trying to value ourselves and make these decisions in our best interest, sometimes we're not going to make everybody happy, right? If we're using the FAST skill, let's say from DBT for self-respect effectiveness, sometimes, you know, when you look out for yourself or you say no to somebody or you stick up for your own interest, the other person isn't going to respond that well. So you have to be willing to have courage to do it anyway, all right? Even if it doesn't please other people. So that's, you know, you gotta dig it up deep and believe you're worth it. So if you believe in your inner value and goodness, and you truly believe you're worth doing these things, it'll help you summon the courage to make the decisions you got to make. All right? Okay, so this is a little bit opposite of the slide we had before. So instead of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, now we're going to tune in. You build trust with yourself by being willing to be with yourself. Okay? So instead of running away or ignoring, right, with your self-abandonment, we're going to use mindfulness, right? Make an appointment with yourself every day to tune in, okay? Feel what you're feeling. Notice what you're thinking. Just ask yourself, how am I doing today? What's going on? Am I okay? What do I need, right? That starts to build trust because when you're there for yourself, you can trust yourself, right? When you're willing to look at what's there. And instead of ignoring your intuition, you can acknowledge and follow your inner guidance, right? not to run away from it or rationalize it. Let it guide your actions. Let it be part of your wise mind, right? Instead of ignoring your emotions or suppressing them or doing target behaviors to make them go away, you're going to validate your emotions. Remind yourself why they make sense, okay? Remind yourself how they are useful and valuable in this situation, right? Cope skillfully with your emotions by using coping skills rather than destructive actions. That builds self-trust, okay? You're going to identify and appropriately meet your needs in a healthy way, okay? And believing that you're valuable enough to do this. Allowing your actions to align with your wise mind values. So first it involves listing what your values are, at least to start with. And if you're not sure what to do, look at that list and help them guide your wise mind decisions, right? And when you do that consistently, you build trust with yourself, okay? All right, so more self-trust actions, okay? Prioritizing your safety, physical safety, emotional safety, things like that, okay? So that involves making good decisions about who you're spending time with. Am I spending time with safe people? Am I keeping my space safe? Am I keeping my doors locked at night? Am I keeping sharps around me if I know that could be triggered by that? Am I keeping bottles of alcohol in the house in case company comes, even though I have a drinking problem, right? Am I keeping numbers of my old dealers on my phone just in case, right? What am I keeping in my space? And is it safe for me, right? How do I feel about the area I'm living in? How could I design it so I feel better? Where prioritize my safety in terms of where I go. Am I staying in safe neighborhoods? Am I going out at night? Am I going out alone when I should be with somebody, right? Thinking about where am I going and how am I making safe decisions about where to go? And what time you go out, right? And whether you're with people or not when you go out. God, I forgot where I heard this, but I remember someone saying like, nothing good happens after midnight. You know, if you're out way too late and there's a lot of sketchy people around, you know, you got to be careful, right? So being careful about what time you're out and where you are and who you're with always is important, and it's important with your safety, right? Okay. Prioritizing your physical and mental health, right? If you're sick, you got to take care of it. Keep your doctor's appointments, keep your therapy appointments. You know, take care, don't run yourself into the ground. You know, take a break before you break, as Vidyamala Birch would say. If you're in DBT, this is all about the please skill. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, please stands for treat physical illness, exercise, avoid mood altering drugs, get enough sleep, and healthy eating, okay? So eating in a way that makes you feel good, right? Putting healthy things in your body, okay? I heard once from a yoga teacher that one of the things we could do to be healthy is keeping in mind what comes in and out of all the different holes in our body. You think about, right, what kind of air are we breathing? Are we breathing in cigarette smoke or fresh air? What are we eating? What are we listening to, right? Who are we having sex with, right? All these things have to do with the different holes in our body and what we're putting in and taking out, right? And that's about building trust and safety, right? If I take care of those, it's good for me, right? Can I trust that I'm going to eat the right thing even if I go to some dinner party? Am I still going to take those actions to eat the right stuff for me, right? Okay, another version of self-trust actions. I guess I could say kind of like being mindful of how you budget your time, right? If you don't take care of yourself and you betray yourself, you might let other people and responsibilities dictate how your time goes. But if you're really taking care of yourself and being your own best friend, you're going to make sure that your time is managed well for you, right? That let's say you do have some work, but you do have some time to play. You do have some time for relationships. You carve out time to pursue interests or healthy activities such as exercise or meditation. And you keep commitments to have your schedule in a way that makes sense for you. And that sometimes you might have to say no to people when necessary, because taking on a certain commitment gets in the way of something else that's for your benefit. Okay, so that's getting assertive again, right? Using your fast skill. Okay. Okay, and self-trust in relationships. So first, relationship to yourself. So in building a healthier relationship with yourself, You got to trust that you're always going to try to be unconditionally kind to yourself and loving, no matter what, even if you screw up, right? If you can't trust that you can make a mistake and be okay with yourself, you're betraying yourself, right? So treat yourself and the parts of yourself with kindness, with compassion, right? With unconditional love, with care and forgiveness, okay? And it's important to accept our flaws because we're human beings and we're supposed to have flaws. And sometimes it's the path of working through your flaws and your mistakes that helps you to learn and grow. So to be patient and tolerant with yourself when you make mistakes, repair it if necessary, and use it as fuel for your next level of your personal development, okay? And then in relationships, which is kind of similar because there's a relationship to yourself and relationships to others, right? That you're going to believe in your inner goodness and value by allowing positive people into your life, believing that you're worth keeping good people in your life, right? And the people that you let in your life should also be people that accept you as you are, including your flaws, okay? And who are able to show you love, care, and respect, all right? And to believe that you're worth this is really important. And in your relationships, to make sure you're maintaining healthy boundaries, also related to the fast skill. So you're not spilling out too much, you're not taking in too much from other people, soaking in all their stuff, but you're also not too blocked off and cut off from people, right? There's a healthy level of give and take in the relationship, okay? And also, if you currently are in toxic relationships, kind of re-examine, like to do a little audit of your relationships. Which ones can be repaired and which ones should just be ended, right? It's probably in the end not worth it keeping toxic people in your life if those relationships can't really be repaired adequately, because it's just going to keep you sick. It's going to be very hard for you to get healthier if you're surrounding yourself by toxic so-called people, all right? Okay, so I'm going to close with, you are the one you've been waiting for, all right? Be your own best friend. Don't abandon yourself. Do all these kind things for yourself because you're worth it, okay? And you'll find your life is going to get a whole lot better, all right? Because if it's not you, who, right? And if you can do this for yourself, you'll practice taking it in, and you'll also be more accepting of other people who are kind to you too, okay? All right, so go out and love yourselves, everybody, okay? All right, much love to you, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye for now.